Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to AJ101 Criminal Law, and we are online. And this is going to be week 18. So, congratulations to everybody that can hear my voice right now. You have made it through to week 18, and I made it as well. So, congratulations to all of us. And the semester is almost over. And tonight, we're going to basically do a quick review. I also want to point out some other things that are available for you to utilize to take your final. So the first thing would be that in each one of the weekly content areas, I do post PowerPoints that are not audio done, if you will. So you don't have to listen to me if you don't want to. You can just go through the PowerPoints and you can look at the information at your leisure, or you can listen to the lecture kind of audio presentation where I actually speak and go through the PowerPoint as well and add some additional comments here and there or what have you. Along with that, you have the terminology quizzes, which I hope you have been doing because they are really good to help you understand some of the terms and what they mean. And those definitions really come in handy as well because you see a lot of those on your quizzes and exams. So hopefully all of that together will help you as you go into your final. And tonight we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Bill of Rights because 18 weeks ago we started off with this, and it's only appropriate that we finish with it because it is so important to not only law enforcement, public safety, but the entire criminal justice system as a whole. When we're done with the quick overview, and I mean quick, of the Bill of Rights, we'll jump into the study guide, which is posted on Blackboard. You should be able to find it on the left-hand side of your Blackboard page. There's a link that says study guide. You click on that and you will get the chapter exam number 3 study guide, which, by the way, will cover chapters 11, 12, 14, 15, and 17. So again, 11, 12, 14, 15, and 17. We didn't have enough time to cover all of the chapters that we needed to, so I had to leave a couple out, but that's okay. But feel free to seek knowledge and to read those chapters and try to understand what is going on, because again, the more that you study, the more context that can really come to some of the scenarios and things that we're talking about, and you'll have a better understanding as a whole on this whole criminal law thing. So with that being said, let's jump into our overview of the Bill of Rights. And we're going to go quick, and some of it might be a little bit of a rehash for a lot of you, but it is good to kind of rehash things and to relearn and to make sure that we kind of know what we're talking about as it relates to this. So the Americans declared their independence from Great Britain in 1776. In 1787, though, they adopted the United States Constitution. The Constitution told how their new government was going to work, but in some states, there was still some thought that the Constitution didn't say enough about the rights of the people. So in 1791, Congress added the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and these first 10 amendments are commonly referred to as the Bill of Rights, and I'm going to throw in the 14th Amendment because it's an important one as well. And these are individual rights, okay, that the government cannot take away. And while we don't apply every one of these each and every day in policing, you will quickly see, or you have learned, that some are very important to law enforcement and the job that we do each and every day. So here we go, the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And I've kind of slimmed out all that legalese down into a couple of bullet points. You'll also notice on the slides tonight there's a little link to a YouTube video. So if you want to know a little bit more, you can click on that, and there's like a 5 or a 6 minute video about each one of these. So the First Amendment, we know, talks about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble, and the right to petition the government for redress. The Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. Now, the Second Amendment, there's a little confusion here. It does certainly cover the right to keep and bear arms, but remember, different states can enact different laws. Therefore, one state might think it's okay for you to open carry a firearm, if you will, which is becoming the trend in a lot of states, and some states do not allow that. So just remember, there's different laws, and the state reserves that right for some of these laws. So what it really means is, if you can think a long time ago about, your home is your castle, and you do have the right to defend your home, and that's really kind of where this started. It's been taken kind of a little bit by some, a little bit out of context, but at the end of the day, the right to keep and bear firearms is under the Second Amendment. It also addresses gun ownership and things like the Brady Law. Third Amendment, this amendment guards against the forced quartering of troops, because in the years before the American Revolution, British officials forced the colonists to quarter or to house and feed British troops. So it goes on to say here, no soldier in time of peace will be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. The Fourth Amendment, the biggie. I mean, a lot of them are biggies, but this is a biggie for law enforcement. The right of the people to be secure of their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see kind of it's slimmed down a little bit, that basically the Fourth Amendment forbids unreasonable search and seizures. Now, there's exceptions in the Fourth Amendment where you're allowed to, search and seize and what have you. But it doesn't say that you can't search and you can't seize. It says that it forbids unreasonable, and the law defines what unreasonable is. There's this concept that we're not going to spend a lot of time on because we've already discussed it in prior chapters, called the exclusionary rule. And if you look at these two cases, Weeks versus United States and Mapp versus Ohio, that should refresh your memory. The Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Now, we didn't cover a lot about grand juries. And some counties, you have grand juries in counties, states and counties. Specifically, every county will usually have a grand jury. However, there's an exception, if you will, to where you can go directly to the DA's office, and this may be more specific to California, to file a felony case, if you will, where you have enough probable cause and information to support your case. The district attorney can file the case, and you don't have to go through a grand jury. Now, there are a lot of, counties that will use the grand jury. Okay, but, California does on some cases, but on some cases it doesn't. But anyway, I just wanted you to know that. Continuing on, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. Well, how about being tried for the same crime twice? That's kind of what they mean. Nor shall anyone be compelled in a criminal case to be a witness against themselves. So you don't have to testify against yourself. That's kind of where that's coming from. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So no double jeopardy. Privilege against self-incrimination, and the right to due process. Sixth Amendment, another biggie. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, the jurisdiction, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. So you have the right to be told what your crime is and so forth, and to be confronted with the witnesses against him, meaning you have the right to confront and cross-examine witnesses, those that are accusing you of a crime. You have the right to have compulsory process for obtaining witness in your favor, subpoena power of the court, where you can have somebody come in and testify on your behalf, and of course the right to have the assistance of counsel for your defense. So the Sixth Amendment covers and establishes requirements for criminal trials: speedy public trial, informed of the nature and cause, be confronted with and able to cross-examine witnesses against oneself, the subpoena power of the court, and of course legal counsel. Seventh Amendment basically lays out the rules of common law. And the Eighth Amendment, kind of another biggie: excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. Now, we probably know what excessive bail or excessive fines are and what that means, but the other thing in here would be issues of cruel and unusual punishment, and that could be issues. An example would be like regarding the death penalty, and whether or not that's considered to be cruel and or unusual. The Ninth Amendment ensures that the individual rights that are not enumerated in the Constitution are secure. That is, that these rights should not be automatically infringed upon, thrown out, or not used because they are omitted from the Constitution. So just because they're not there doesn't automatically mean that somebody's rights will be basically tossed aside or what have you. The 10th Amendment: the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people, and the states have the right to enact laws and so forth. And the last one, but certainly not the least, the 14th Amendment: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are, it doesn't say could be, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection under the law. On this slide, go to the bottom right-hand corner, and that one sentence at the top says it all. All people are created equal. So that's a quick overview of the Bill of Rights, and then throwing in the 14th Amendment. Now, we're going to start to look at our study guide, and this is kind of a screenshot of the study guide. Again, it's posted in Blackboard, so you have that available to you, and you can certainly use it to its fullest extent. I'm not going to give you the answers to all of these, of course, but I am going to kind of direct you on kind of how to look at this and give you a couple of ideas as well. So the first chapter is going to talk about homicide, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples as well, but I'm also going to show you a chart that I think is really important that you use, because, and you can use this chart, okay, during the test. So don't feel like you're cheating or anything like that. I want you to be able to reference information to help you apply what it is that we're learning. And the chart that I'm speaking of is going to be this right here. So if you look at this chart right here, this is a kind of a homicide chart. Now, it's in your textbook at the end of chapter 11, but it shows how homicide is like the big umbrella. Okay, and we get murder and homicide mixed up. So think of homicide as kind of the big umbrella. And underneath that are the types of homicide, if that makes it kind of easier. And if you look at the left side of the chart here, you can see there is, murder, and it's unlawful. So you can see first-degree murder. There's a list of those crimes that fit in that category. There's second-degree murder, which would be all others. And then also on that left-hand side, you can see the different types of malice. And we know that there's express and implied malice. We've learned that, or hopefully we have. There's two types. It's in Penal Code 188. And express malice is manifested by a deliberate intent to take a life of another. Willfully implied exists where there is no considerable provocation, or when circumstances attending the killing show an abandon and what they might call a malignant heart. So the difference between first and second degree murder is malice. Express is first, implied is second. So hopefully that kind of helps that. And then remember too, premeditation must be shown to or proven to establish murder. And premeditation means to kind of think of the act beforehand. And it may only take a couple of seconds. So just to kind of get you that. Now you look in the center of the chart, you can see that caption up at the top. So you have murder on the left, on the right you see death, the different types of death. So there's a lawful area in there, and then there's an unlawful. Well, the lawful has things called justifiable homicide and excusable homicide, and they're both different. And you can look at what falls down beneath those. On the right, there's the unlawful, and those are the manslaughter section. So there's voluntary manslaughter and involuntary manslaughter, and then there's vehicular manslaughter, which is the one that kind of goes down the middle at the bottom there. It talks about driving a vehicle. So use this chart as we talk about this homicide, these questions, or focusing in where we're going to go here. So number one, know the essential elements of criminal homicide. Understand that, if you remember anything in chapter 11, what the elements of criminal homicide are, or kind of like how they come about. Remember that, the term corpus delicti, I think you can kind of remember that. And that term means basically body of the crime is the essential elements of an offense. And it doesn't necessarily, in this case especially, refer to the body of a deceased person in a homicide. It's especially true in California because producing a dead body in a criminal homicide isn't an essential element in California for the crime of murder or manslaughter, but that corpus delicti means the essential elements. And if you look in your book, I'll give you the page if you want to kind of help you out for this chapter, 169. You can look down there and it talks about the corpus delicti of felonious or criminal homicide and the basic elements that are in there. The next thing to look at is the Tennessee versus Garner case, and this is a major precedent case, if you will, and it may not be in your book. I think it is, but if it's not, that's okay, because if you Google Tennessee versus Garner, you're going to get a million hits. And remember that this case really established the precedent for when police can use deadly force. And it was based on the fleeing felon rule, if you will, if you remember that, and officers firing their weapons and killing a burglary suspect. But in Tennessee at that time, it was lawful to shoot a fleeing felon. And the court kind of analyzed that case, if you will. And I'm just kind of, again, taking little pieces out of this. It's not the full case, and basically came to a conclusion. Hey, look, there needs to be more to it. This fleeing felon thing isn't the way to go. So this case really changed the face of lethal force in policing. Know the maximum time allowable whereby a case can be considered be considered a homicide. So there actually is a time limit for homicide. And I think, people, when you watch on TV, you see somebody, the killing happens like right away. And it makes it really easy for us to kind of think, well, it has to happen like that, but it doesn't. So Penal Code 194, and remember this is California Penal Code, talks about the time in which a death must occur in order for it to be deemed a murder or manslaughter. So to make a killing either murder or manslaughter, the victim must die within a certain time period. And that's kind of what we're looking for in that question. So continuing on, you look at number 4, 5, and 6, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary, and justifiable. You go back to that chart that I showed you a minute ago, right here, and you can easily find out what the definitions of those are without having to spend too much time. Know how many degrees of murder there are? Well, you could go back to that other chart right there, and it'll tell you exactly how many degrees of murder there are. Number 8. Now, you're going to have to read between the lines in chapter 11, but I'll give you a hint. You can go back to chapter 3, okay, and you can actually go to page 42. I'll help you out even more, and you'll be able to identify these two terms on what they mean. Now, you can Google it if you want, but I'll give you a couple of examples of what we're looking for, okay? And chapter 3 talked about the elements of crime and corpus delicti and all that cool, interesting stuff. But that was a long time ago, so you may not remember. So the vicarious liability doctrine basically holds that where 2 or more suspects have agreed to kill as part of a plan that they're going to carry out their crime, each one of those suspects is guilty of murder when any of them kills. So an easy example for us to kind of think about it, carload of gang members agree to do a drive-by shooting to kill a rival gang member. All of the suspects will be liable for the resulting murder, even though only one of them did the actual killing. That is an example of the vicarious liability rule. Now, the provocative act theory says that under the proximate cause provocative act theory, if you will, surviving accomplices can be convicted of murder where the intended victim or police kill one of the accomplices in response to an act committed by one of these surviving accomplices. So that you're probably going, oh my gosh, what did he just say? That's like kind of brutal. I don't really understand it. Well, here's kind of an example of something like that might help you kind of get that question. So one of 2 robbers. So 2 robbers go into a store, and one of them unexpectedly takes it upon himself to pistol whip the clerk, and the clerk in return shoots and kills the other robber. The surviving robber would be guilty of what? Well, actually, under the provocative act rule, that surviving person would be guilty of murder. So hopefully that kind of clears that up for you, and you have a better understanding on where I'm coming from that. So now let's keep going, because we got to get through this and we don't want to spend too much time on it. So chapter 12 now, we're going to talk about false imprisonment and restraint crimes and kidnapping and child abduction, rape, unlawful sexual intercourse. So that's kind of what the chapter covers. So know the age limit for unlawful sexual intercourse and whether it matters if it's a male or a female to make it a crime. Well, I think we've talked about that, but gender doesn't make a difference when it comes to rape or unlawful sexual intercourse. And there is an age limit. 261.5, if you recall, is the section code that will kind of help you look that up. But there's an age limit for unlawful sexual intercourse. Number 2, know the definition of kidnapping and what the most important factor is. Well, if you go into your chapter and you start to look at your kidnapping sections, okay, it's gonna talk about what that most important crime is, or element is, and I'll try to give you an example that I think that we can kind of all understand. So kidnapping, okay, so when you read the definition, every person who forcibly or by another means instilling fear, steals, takes, or holds, detains, or arrests any person in the state and carries that person to another country, state, or county, or into another part of the same county is guilty of kidnapping. Okay, and one of the big things that has to be shown in there, so that's what they're asking for the question is, what needs to be shown for kidnapping? Okay, and part of that is going to be like, well, here, I'll give you an example instead of kind of beating around the bush. In kidnapping, asportation has to be substantial, meaning the movement, the taking. Okay, so that's one of the elements that really has to be there. And I just kind of gave you the answer to it. The next one coming up, so know what the word asportation means. Well, that means movement, to move. So I think we're probably good there. Know the definition of stalking. You can look that one up, and you should have no problem figuring that one. Know the actus reus of false imprisonment. So kidnapping and false imprisonment, remember, are a little bit different. And the elements are a little bit different. And the most important element we talked about for kidnapping is the movement, okay? The asportation. So what would be the most important element for false imprisonment? Remember, false imprisonment is a restraint crime, so it would kind of go without saying that restraint more than likely would be one of those most important elements, and I kind of gave it to you, but that's okay. Know the California Penal Code section for false imprisonment. So 236, that is the penal code number. Know what human trafficking is. So I will let you look that up in your book, and there is the definition there, so that's pretty easy. Know the two essential elements of kidnapping. Okay, so before we talked about kind of what the most important one, but which was the asportation or movement. Remember, but part of that thing is there has to be the forcible taking. So those are two big elements for that. Know what child abduction is. And I'm not going to give you the definition, but I can give you an example. So let's say if a child's father has legal custody following a divorce and the child's mother takes the child from school, flees to another state with the intent to keep the kid away from the father, that would be an example of child abduction. And then know the age whereby someone could be the victim of statutory rape. Well, statutory rape and unlawful sexual intercourse are kind of synonymous, the same, if you will. So that age would be the same. So if you figured out the first one, you'll be able to figure out the next one. Okay, so there's that. Let's move on very quickly to chapter 14. And we're going to talk a little bit about burglary. So we're going to want to know the elements of burglary. Now, again, use the PowerPoints too, because there are slides that will just jump right out at you and show you what the elements of burglary are. Know the most essential element of burglary. Well, there's a lot of elements that need to be in there, but remember, we talked about intent. Now, there's general intent and specific intent. And for burglary, specific intent is really needed because you have to have the intent to go in and commit a theft or a felony, etc. So if you don't have that intent, then the whole burglary thing kind of goes away and it's more or less just a theft. So, kind of remember the intent part when it comes to burglary. Know when exactly when a burglary is completed. So it's complete the moment when what? Would it be completed like right when they thought about the burglary and they haven't really done it yet? Or would it be completed like once they enter the location? So make sure you read, in your textbook and look at the slides because they will give you the exact answer to stuff like this. I'm just kind of driving you in the right direction. Know if burglary requires physical breaking to enter. So do we have to actually break a window? Does a burglar have to break the window and force his way in or her way in? Because it could be a woman, right? Or if the door's just closed but the door's unlocked, if you have the requisite intent to go in and commit that felony, is that good enough for burglary? And I would venture to say that it certainly is. Let's see, know how many degrees of burglary there are. So look on the PowerPoint, that'll help you with that. Know what a lockpick is used for. Okay, well I think you guys watch enough TV to probably figure out what a lockpick is used for, to pick locks. Know the definition of looting. So this one, I'm not sure if they had a good example in the textbook. So think of it like this. During some of the big riots that you've seen on television, when things are going on and people are kind of going, crazy, if you will, and maybe they start lighting fires and they start breaking windows on businesses and throwing chairs, things like that. And then they go into these businesses and they start to take property. And typically, it's an emergency situation. So looting really occurs during a state of emergency like that. So that's a pretty good example I think I can give to you for that. Number 8, know what circumstances need to be present for auto burglary to occur. What factors have to be present on the car? So there's a slide exactly for that. So for a residence is one thing, but for a car, some other things have to be there, some other factors. And then number 9, know what a burglary tool consists of and can you arrest for it? So let me give you kind of an example to help you out on that. So let's say that you're driving around in the middle of the night. It's like 2 in the morning, and you pull into a business district behind a big warehouse, and you see a guy that's walking there all dressed in dark clothes or whatever, and you stop them, and they're found to have maybe a screwdriver and some other tools and things with them. When you talk to them, you're investigating your crime. They live across town, and they couldn't give you a good reason why they're there, and it is the middle of the night, and maybe they have a flashlight and gloves and other things. You would be able to, or would you be able to arrest someone for possessing burglary tools? So kind of think about that one. But there's a slide that talks about that one as well. So that in essence kind of covers the chapter for burglary. Okay, moving on real quick because we're going to try to get done in like 45 minutes. And we're getting close. So chapter 15, we're going to talk about robbery and extortion. So know the elements of robbery. And you can look right on the slides and it will tell you what the elements of robbery are. And, what's the most essential element of robbery? Well, remember, kidnapping had like its essential element, right? The movement, the force or fear in the movement. And false imprisonment had the essential element of restraint. So think about what it would be for robbery if you were to read the definition of robbery. And, so just kind of remember that, and the slide will tell you kind of what it is. So know the definition of carjacking. So that's in your book as well. There's a slide for it. Know the definition of robbery. We kind of already talked about that. Know the definition of extortion. So, there's a little bit of a difference. Well, there is a difference between robbery and extortion. And, there's another word for it that kind of helps you out too. So blackmail. So when you blackmail somebody, you extort them. So that, and you'll be able to kind of, again, if you look at the PowerPoint, you'll figure that one out. Know how many degrees of robbery there are? Well, that's pretty simple. So you'll be able to find that one really easy. And then know the two aspects of taking for robbery. So just like the two important elements for kidnapping and things like that, there's two things that kind of have to be present on the taking part, because when you rob someone, you're taking their property. And they call that caption. Okay, and caption means taking. And then asportation, we've already talked about that. That means to move. So those are two essential elements or aspects of taking when it comes to robbery. So hopefully that kind of helps give you a little bit of direction on that one. And then the last chapter that we're going to go over here real quick is going to be chapter 17. And we're going to talk about controlled substances, alcohol, and abuse crimes. And the first thing we're going to talk about is constructive possession. And what does that really mean to be constructively in possession of something? So we'll talk about the two different types. So there are two types, and the law recognizes two types, and it's actual and constructive. And actual possession means, the person actually has it. They have, they knowingly have direct physical control over a thing. So they're in possession of it. Now, constructive, on the other hand, would be what? What would you kind of think it might be? So if you don't actually have possession of it, maybe you have something different. I'm trying to kind of help you out on this. So kind of a person who, although not in actual possession, knowingly has the control over a thing, either directly or through another person. So maybe the backpack on the front seat of the car that has the 5 pounds of cocaine in it, you're the only one in the car, it's your backpack. See what I mean? So I'm just trying to give you some examples without giving you the entire answer on that one. So there's the constructive possession thing. Know the definition of tolerance and what that means when it comes to like narcotics or drugs. So it's, the body's adjustment to the presence of drugs. And some people have a higher tolerance or a lower tolerance. Know where most drug offenses can be found. What book or code? Where do we find this? And there's like a couple of different codes. One main code where we tend to find all of the information regarding drugs, even though there's a little bit, in some other places. Number 4, know what the Uniform Controlled Substance Act is. Well, what is that? And what's it used for? So that's in the on a slide as well, and in the textbook. Know the difference between actual and constructive possession. Well, I kind of went through that one already. Know the definition of addiction. So what's it mean to be addicted? So we know tolerance is a body's adjustment to the presence of something. Okay, and in this case, we're talking about drugs. Well, on the other hand, a more rooted thing like a craving or psychological dependence or something that steers you more towards addiction. Know the elements of possession, or how the elements of possession can be shown in a case. Well, we talked about, remember, we talked about actual and constructive. So, those are ways that those can be done. And then, know what the legal blood alcohol limit is in California. And, there's a percent there that you'll be looking for in the textbook. So that is really it. So we are pretty much done with our overview of the study guide. And again, congratulations to all of you for making it through. And I certainly appreciate your hard work and your virtual attendance, if you will, as we went through this course. I hope you actually learned something, and I look forward to having you in either one of my face-to-face classes or in another online class. Don't forget, I posted a few final thoughts. Also, I believe in the content folder for week 18, so please take a listen to that, and I'll have a few final thoughts. And again, congratulations to all of you, and that will be it for tonight.